Untitled, Runes, ZOSO, Led Zeppelin IV, or just the fourth album. Their all-time best-selling record and the birthplace for symbols and personal branding. With the major achievements in composition from Led Zeppelin III, this was the only place they could go. It captured their growing confidence as musicians mastering the art of rock and roll, past the mixed reactions of 1970 and the alleged Acoustic album that many criticized as a sonic letdown, past the airstrike of Zeppelin II. As much as they wanted to connect with the organic sounds of nature and forests, the inevitable pressure of the business to deliver their best work yet filled their spirits with inspiration and desire to prove everybody wrong. And just like Michael Jordan, they took it personally and musically. Like the album cover, they removed the critics' paper writings off the walls and reclaimed their status in the modern-day concrete jungle. The last part of their fourth album classic run is an accomplishment in rock history, that of teams winning back-to-back championships. The crowning moment of their early-day dynasty was set in stone on November 8th, 1971. Now let's fast forward 30 calendars to the year 2001 and my teenage self. So I got their first three albums in the following order: 3, 2, 1, and then I watched The Song Remains the Same. Add in BBC Sessions next, and my exposure to the Zeppelin IV numbers was a live in concert setting. By the time I got my CD copy of Untitled, my first impression of Black Dog Rock and Roll, Stairway to Heaven, and Going to California was, I prefer the live versions. This opinion would change, of course, as years went by, and I learned to appreciate its timeless production values. As for the rest of the album, how I wish I could go back to that very first moment when I discovered these songs. I remember Misty Mountain Hop from the Almost Famous movie. Its wall of sound punch was killer. Battle of Evermore was sublime, and with the Lord of the Rings film series released back then, it was just a perfect soundtrack. I'll be honest, Four Sticks was not my favorite, but I liked the riff and drumming style, plus the strange interlude. After the 3.5 minute mark, I felt it was quite repetitive. But the album highlight for me was the epic closing number, When the Levee Breaks. It was like an album within the album, a sinister blues that morphed into a powerful drug that my teenage version used as a perfect escape to deal with the absurdity and pressures of high school. You couldn't ask for more. Led Zeppelin IV didn't have too many covers like their debut. It wasn't muddy sounding like their follow-up, and it wasn't Led Zeppelin III with the electric and acoustic worlds colliding like the Big Bang. No, Zeppelin IV took note and learned from previous lessons. The songs hit you up front without the necessity of repeated listens to lure you in, and I think this is where the problem lies for hardcore Zeppelin fans. It just feels like a greatest hits package. It's no wonder 7 of 8 songs were used on box set 1990. Join me as I dare to revisit a tale that has been told many times, but I'm sure we'll find a different angle to the tours, sessions, and context that resulted in a collection of songs that cemented their legacy as classic rock icons. Like the old man in the cover, the band gathered all the elements and materials they needed for success. This is the making of, well, not sure what name to pick here, so I will just leave it blank, as you can't pronounce the symbols altogether. An album I have 5 copies of. This is the making of. Like Physical Graffiti, the story of their fourth album begins right after the band finished their US tour at Madison Square Garden. It was September 19, 1970. Jimi Hendrix died the day before, and Led Zeppelin played 2 shows on the same day, grossing $100,000 for these 2 shows alone. They dethroned the Beatles in the polls and navigated the waters of the growing rock and roll business like big fish ready for it all. The band was awarded gold discs for US and European sales for their follow-up. Led Zeppelin III was released on October 5th, so technically speaking, there was no concert tour series to promote it. yet the numbers speak volumes on their popularity. For all the critics who said this was an acoustic album and questioned the band's ability, let's take a look at the best-selling albums of 1970. We can definitely say it was a great year for rock and roll. Top 10 records had Cat Stevens at number 10, Van Morrison at number 9, Creedence at number 8 with one of their best albums, Sly and the Family Stones' Greatest Hits at number 7, Santana's Milestone Abraxas at number 6, The Beatles' Swan Song at number 5 with almost 6 million copies sold, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young at number 4 with almost 8 million, Black Sabbath's Paranoid at number 3 with 12 million units, Led Zeppelin IV at 13 million for their silver medal, and Simon & Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water taking the number 1 spot at 25 million records. 1970 was also a great year for the band, with Zeppelin II charting for 6 weeks on Billboard's number 1 and their most recent release at 4 weeks. So it's fair to say Zeppelin's latest record was a hit, but the band read the reviews, they heard the feedback and they were not happy. It was a groundbreaking album that, as we will see, became foundational for what happened next. This was the only time in Zeppelin history that these guys did not tour the album and went straight ahead into writing their next release. Talk about feeling the urge to make it, to shoot critics down, and take advantage of their momentum. It has to be said, Zeppelin's competitors were getting better. It was a collective time to rock hard, and also look into light and shade terrains. They had to think fast before it was too late to make their masterpiece. You almost feel, had Led Zeppelin III not been published in 1970, it could have been a double album by 1971. With so many good songs arriving at their creative quarters, maybe their world wasn't ready for it. The musical setting of September through December 1970 was exciting. Outside of the best-selling titles, there were other albums record buyers got their hands on. September, the Allman Brothers' follow-up, Idlewild South, had heavy grooves and tight jams in the ways of In Memory of Elizabeth Reed. Atomic Rooster's Death Walks Behind You was a best of progressive rock moments led by synchronized crunch guitars, flashy solos, and daring riffs. Jesus Christ Superstar, the album, inspired a rock opera a year later, and hundreds of versions to this day. October, Pink Floyd's Odyssey, At Some Hard Mother was released 3 days before Led Zeppelin's third album. Chunga's Revenge took Frank Zappa's Mothers further down the road of rock and roll parody and experimentation. Although they released an album in 1969, Trespass was Genesis' first official record as a band, an underrated voyage into the chiaroscuro world of fascinating lyrics and meticulous musical passages. The Strabs' own Just a Collection of Antiques and Curios was a showcase of handcrafted folk rock, with Rick Wakeman adding his own virtuoso contributions. November had many great releases: Derek and the Dominos, Grand Funk, ELP's debut, but the star of all these late 1970 albums was, of course, George Harrison's quintessential All Things Must Pass. I believe this album had the greatest impact on Led Zeppelin in terms of songwriting, overdubs, sonic design, sound engineering, universal message, and looking at the album cover thinking they should take their electric endeavors to the countryside once again. Although it ranks 11th for record sales in 1970, it was an experience for the heart and mind. Where many rock albums that year had a similar style and dry sound, George Harrison knocked everyone on their feet with this monumental piece of work. If you listen both albums back to back, there's a direct influence on Zeppelin's fourth album. Now, in general terms of the music business, many hard rock bands were sort of doing reworked versions of Immigrant Song and Out on the Tiles by late 1970. Zeppelin was always one step ahead of the game, and All Things Must Pass. They were ready to hit the studio and once again challenge themselves. Following the footsteps of Led Zeppelin III, the band was back at Island Studios, London, for a series of recording sessions that became the fourth album's backbone. Four Sticks was the first song they laid out on tape at studio number 2. With compressed sounding drums and so much stuff going on, this was a nightmare to mix. It was allegedly worked out by Page and Plant before reuniting with their bands for recording. What still puzzles me is why John Bonham didn't get a writing credit on this one. A two-part song that took the band into jazz rock terrains. Right off the bat, there's a main riff with a similarity in sound to Dave Brubeck's Take 5. With a time signature of 5/8, which you count as 5 hits each bar. As we know, John Bonham played this song with 2 sets of drumsticks on each hand due to his alleged beef with Ginger Baker in the quest for best drummer. I also found the first minute and a half of Fleetwood Mac's Oh Well Part 1 to be an inspiration for this song. From the shaker beat to the guitar motif, I'm pretty sure Jimmy was a fan of this incarnation of the band. Now let's just state that the inspiration also came within Zeppelin's own universe. The guitar riff took its cue from the double string response of Hola Love, but this time on the 4th and 3rd string. And then there's section B with a slight Middle Eastern and drone effect in the key of A. This is a very clever variation on the orchestral arrangement for Led Zeppelin III's Friends, using the musical technique known as transposition. You could easily switch between these 2 melodies if played on the same key, as the Arabic scale remains the same. John Paul Jones played a VSC3 synthesizer on 4 sticks for the first time. He would revisit the instrument in Houses of the Holy. Robert's lyrics could be interpreted as a variation on the Babe I'm Gonna Leave You narrative. With high-pitched vocals courtesy of Plant's 1970 pipes, it is a very demanding track to attempt. The only live performance of the song took place on May 3rd, 1971, at Copenhagen, Denmark. I can see why the song was dropped after only 1 killer performance. Not only it's a tricky one to play live, but the middle section didn't quite capture the studio version effect. For this they needed Jones on keyboards, but also a Moog synthesizer to come close to the drone effect. You can't do that with an organ or electric piano. 4 sticks was later worked out by Page and Plant with an Indian orchestra in late October 1972. You can check the story of these sessions on the Making of Houses of the Holy, Episode 2. The song became a concert staple for the entire Page and Plant led World Tour of 1995 and 1996. Henry Rollins recorded his own version for the 1995 Encomium tribute album. And last but not least, it was also a frequent number on Robert Plant's solo career shows from 2001 until 2018. The second track laid out on tape at Island Studios and probably the second most important song from the 4th album Sessions. Officially released on Coda's 2015 Deluxe Edition package and one of the best bonus tracks from the whole remastered series back then, it's the perfect bridge between the 3rd album Hard Rock Sound and its final destination just 79 days later by the name of When the Levee Breaks. Besides John Bonham's groove being heavily inspired by traveling Riverside blues and Jimmy's guitar approach similar to the electric style of Jennings' Farm Blues, John Paul Jones steals the show here with a sick bass line that holds the pieces together. Robert's vocals are somewhat shy, but allow the listener to watch the blueprint signaling where they would go next. If people question Jimmy Page the producer, this is a very good example of his vision. Where he took this song is quite an achievement in sound. More on this later in the story. Black Dog, an institution of its own within the Zeppelin catalog. The basic tracks were recorded at studio number 2, so we've heard over the years that the inspiration for this song came from yet again Fleetwood Mac's Oh Well Part 1 from 1969. Although there's some similarity in the vocal phrasing around the 1:37-minute mark, that's it really. The guitar parts are nothing like Black Dog.
Can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin.
So where did inspiration come from? Well, I can think that we're influenced by both Deep Purple's Bloodsucker from In Rock, released in June 1970, and Geezer Butler's bass intro for Black Sabbath's NIB, off their debut album, released on February 1970. Because Jumble Jones has stated he came up with the main riff for Black Dog, I can also hear some big band swing inspiration in there. And after all, let's remember John's father played with the Bert Ambrose Orchestra at some point in his career. Jimi Hendrix Who Knows from Band of Gypsies, released on March 25th, 1970, also has a similar swing feel to Black Dog. You can actually sing Zeppelin's riff over the beat and it works. Now, leaving out inspiration from other bands, variations on the Black Dog riff can be traced back to Led Zeppelin II in songs like Heartbreaker and Living Loving Maid. There's also Out on the Tiles from their third album. If you pay close attention to the elements for this song, you will find compositional evidence that Black Dog is like the logical evolution of it. It's no wonder they used Out on the Tiles as intro for Black Dog when performed live on stage. From the sense of rhythm displacement to the way the riff is attacked in unison by Page and Jones, it's Led Zeppelin stepping up their own game. Now, the second part of the song where Page plays the A, G, and D chords were not written by Jones but Jimi himself, as he had this acoustic idea early into 1970. A variation of this G and D chord response would be later used on Over the Hills and Far Away. As we know, Page didn't use an amp for his guitar tone here, but plugged himself straight into the console, cranking up the volume to achieve distortion. This is a brilliant technique and something that many 80s rock guitarists fail to comprehend about Page. He wasn't a big distortion guy in the studio. It relied on dynamics more than crunch. The guitar solo portion at the end plus the added harmonies on the main riff are a masterclass in flow and movement. Overdubs for Black Dog were added at Headley Grange in early 1971. With 160 performances of this song in circulation, it was played from 1971 until their last show in Berlin in 1980. All surviving members of the band have played this song in their post-Led Zeppelin years. We have Jumble Jones with 32 times, Jimmy Page the solo artist with 3 times, Page and Plant the duet at 125, and Robert Plant the solo artist at 359 times. Oh yeah, and I forgot the 2007 reunion. So that's a total of 520 performances for Black Dog.